Hi, welcome everybody. Thank you so much for coming out today. I'm Jessie Schulte with the Kent Conservation District, and our mission is to protect and enhance the natural resources of Kent County. So we do this through voluntary programs. We have the MEAP program, which is the Michigan Agricultural Environmental Assurance Program, where we help agricultural producers become environmental verified. And we also have an invasive species strike team. So we're really proud to be here representing the strike team tonight. I don't know if you want to introduce yourself.
My name is Jessica Harchis, and I'm a strike team leader. So we do treatments of various invasive species all around Kent County and also Montcalm County.
So today we wanted to teach you about a few invasive species that might actually be in this park that could actually cause damage to the park long term. And impact the ecology of the park and the beauty and the value of the park. So one of the invasive plants that we're really passionate about is called bittersweet vine. And we've got a great sample here. And I don't know how many of you guys know about invasive plants, but these plants don't have predators. So they don't have insects or fungus or even deer. Those deer like to eat everything. Nothing eats these plants to keep them in check. And normally our native plants will be kept in check because there'll be insects and bacteria and fungus. This bittersweet vine can grow 66 feet tall, and it can grow in the summer almost 2 inches a day. And so you could imagine it's almost like a tropical vine that could cover all the trees. And we're really pleased that the Parks and Rec here are concerned about protecting their trees and protecting the beauty of the shrubs and the native plants that are here. How to identify this? This plant has cream-colored bark, so Jessica can pass around this branch for you. It's cream-colored bark, and it has these little white dimples on them. So it's very distinct from other plants. Also, in the fall, it'll start getting these orange, yellowish berries. And what ends up happening is they'll just kind of cover the tree, and then birds will actually spread the berries. And we actually have a joke. We blame Martha Stewart for spreading this invasive plant because she would make those beautiful wreaths out of it in the winter. And then those wreaths, instead of throwing it in the trash can, people would throw it down their backyard. So you should never compost these decorative plants. This is how big this invasive bittersweet vine can grow. So Jessica will hold it up. And Skylar, one of our conservation coordinators, says he's even seen larger vines than this bittersweet vine. So you can see what that could do to tree canopies. Over in Cascade Park System, Ada, up in Rockford, they had these vines basically taking over all of the trees. So it's really important that here in Kentwood that you guys are on the lookout for this invasive, because we call it early detection, rapid response. And if you can identify it early on and pull it out of the ground or cut it, then you can contain it so that it doesn't spread. We're going to show you how we cut the bittersweet vine, and then we're going to go over a number of other vines that might kind of look alike and teach you some other vines. All right. So you've identified the vine. It's got a pointed tip, leaf tip. It's just a single oval leaf, and it's alternate, which means that they're not opposite each other, they're alternate. So you can kind of see here, it's alternating, it's got a pointed branch tip. Some of them are very round, and they stay green. Invasives come out, they're one of the first plants to come out in the spring, and then they're one of the last plants to die back in the fall. All right, so let's say, I guess I could put it up here. Let's say you've got your vine, and it's growing all over your tree. You've properly identified it. So what you want to do is what we call the poodle cut. What we do is we cut it off the tree up here. So you're going to actually cut it off the tree and kind of lop it off. And then what we do is we go to the ground, just an inch off the ground, And then we cut it off the ground, nice and flush with the ground. We don't want to make spikes. A lot of times when we're working with volunteers, they'll cut the branch like this. Let's see if you can hold it in the middle. And then, so what ends up being is, we call them little spikes of death. So in the woods, you've got all these spiky little stems, and you don't want to do that. You want it to be nice and flush with the ground. Come in. And then what you're going to do is you're going to apply, the parks are going to be able to supply this, or you can get approved by the parks. We have these little daubers with concentrated herbicide that's approved for this habitat. And what we're going to do is we're just going to be right above the ground, and we'll flip that over so it's not spiky. Then we're just going to daub that stump like this. And we want to make sure we cover the entire surface of that stem and make sure that it will never grow back. So we're just using a small amount of concentrated treatment for the stump so that it doesn't grow back. And then we're going to kind of look around and see if we see any more vines attached to it, because it's really important to get every single vine off. What are you going to do with all that biomass, all the leaves and stems and vines? You're actually just going to drop it and leave it there. And what we do is we kind of just chop it up into little bits. So that way you're just kind of breaking it up into pieces. If you see berries on the plant, you're going to want to maybe take those and put those in a trash can, because each berry is very highly viable. And that's why it's such a successful invasive, because every seed can become a new plant. And in most of these little seed pods, if you open them up and roll them around your finger, you're going to see quite a few seeds in there. So that's definitely a concern. All right. So let's see. The other thing we wanted to show you was some vines that look alike. The other vines that can be mistaken for our invasive bittersweet vine that can take down our trees and grow this big is our grapevine. So this is the grapevine. There's several different species of grapevine, and when you get a chance to come up here, we're going to let you look at some of the many different leaf shapes, because there's 4 or 5 different grapes that grow here in the park. These grapes are important because they provide food for wildlife. So you'll see that they'll provide grapes in the fall, and that's important for migrating birds. Some of these grapes, we don't want them to take down trees that are close to the trail, so the same technique can be used. This is what the grapevine bark looks like. The grape bark vine is brown and shaggy. We'll let her hold it. And that's very different from, let's see where our sample went. Here it is. Our cream colored vine. So can you see the difference? Grapevine has these little twirls, or we call them little pigtails on the side. They have tendrils. That's for the native grapevine. And then you have the invasive bittersweet vine that's cream colored. So you can kind of see it's kind of shaggy bark. It'll almost look like it's part of the bark is kind of falling off. And then the invasive bittersweet vine, it's not shaggy at all. You could run your hand up, it's very smooth with just those tiny little dipples. So those are the 2 vines that you're going to be seeing out there. Sometimes the grapevine can get large, and it'll kind of take over maybe a shrub or a tree, but it won't get 66 feet tall and just keep canopying over. So keep your eye out for some of the native wild grapevines. Some of the grapevines will confuse you because they have different leaf shapes. You can see this one has lobes, just another one of the many species. Oh yeah. The other vine that we wanted to show you was called Virginia creeper. And this one has 5 leaves. So you can kind of see it like this. And this time of the year, it's bright red. So you'll look up and sometimes it'll climb up, usually the trunk of the tree. This is also a native vine, and it will not kill the tree, unlike the bittersweet vine. Let me see, I thought there was a little tendril here. But, oh, yeah. Okay. So this one right here is kind of mixed in with the grapevine, but I wanted you to see what the fruit looks like on the Virginia creeper. So this is the fruit that's really good for birds and wildlife. And the vine kind of looks similar to grapevine, but it never gets very big. It only gets this big. It will never get thick. So this is how big you'll see. A lot of people get nervous with this one because they're worried that it might be poison ivy. Poison ivy also turns bright red this time of the year, but poison ivy has 3 leaves and it's very hairy on the vine. So we say, if it's a hairy rope, don't be a dope, don't touch that hairy rope. So, but this does not have a hairy rope. Again, it just has tendrils that kind of help it cling to the tree. So that is your Virginia creeper. Other invasives that we're working on that you might want to be aware of is spotted knapweed. This is an invasive that's out here in the park, but this is not as much of a concern as the bittersweet vine. I'm trying to think. Let's see. What we do have is these info sheets. And these info sheets can help you better identify it when you're out on the trails. So you can kind of look at the leaves and compare those round leaves with the drip tip. And they also tell you how to treat it at your home. Because if you have it at your home, you're going to want to get it under control right away. Another characteristic of the vine that I forgot to mention was that it actually has kind of bright orange roots. So if you pulled out a little bit of this vine, and if you pulled it out from the ground, you'd see that kind of bright orange root, and so that would be helpful too. Those are some of the characteristics. So does anybody have any questions on how you'd kind of tackle the vines? You never want to pull the vines down. It's really tempting because you'll see it. You'll be like, oh, I can pull it down. But there could be a large branch above you. A lot of times when the bittersweet or even the grapevine has climbed over, it could cause a dead limb because they like those limbs to climb up, so you don't want to pull it down on you. So I think that's all. Does anybody have any questions or anything you think we should cover? One of the people in the audience asked is if there are any hairs or tendrils. So we talked about Virginia creeper and grapevine having these spiraling tendrils. We talked about poison ivy having hairs. The bittersweet does not. Bittersweet is very unusual. If we had a time lapse of this vine growing, remember it can grow 2 inches a day. So if we had a time lapse of it, it would be like this. So it would grow out, and what it's doing is it's reaching for something to climb onto. And that's why it's so important to do that poodle cut, where you completely clear any area so that the tendrils can't go back up. So this one just kind of spirals around, and whatever it grabs to, then it can shoot up really, really quickly. So poison ivy vine, typically that will not kill a tree. What it does is it will just parallel the tree, so it usually goes up the trunk, and then sometimes it'll reach the canopy. And you have to be careful when you approach the tree, because a lot of times the poison ivy, yeah, exactly, it'll be going up like this, and so you'll come up to a tree and it'll look like the leaves of the tree right there, the 3 leaves with the red dot in the center, and you'll think it's part of the tree leaves, but it's actually the poison ivy. So that's definitely a good question. But poison ivy, that vine, you don't really have to worry about cutting it off the tree. It's not going to kill the tree. So that's good news. Plus you don't want to be touching it too, because that oil can get on everything. So yeah. Jessica, do you want to tell them a little bit about the bittersweet treatments you did today, like what a typical yard looks like? So we have to tell you about infestations to kind of scare you, because this plant can get really aggressive.
Yeah, so we actually did a full day of bittersweet treatments today, and a bad infestation, it will have the understory totally covered in almost a carpet of bittersweet. So we'll have one of our crew members go out and foliar spray it, and then today we had to do the cut stump, like she was saying, the poodle cut. So we had some smaller vines and then some up to, we had some bigger ones today, probably this big, but we've seen them, you can actually count the rings on them just like you would a tree. So we've counted up to 35, so the 35-year-old one, we had to take a chainsaw on it, and that was about this big. So people typically don't realize it's a problem until it's up in the trees and starting to bring trees down, understandably. And today we had some big vines and also the foliar sprains. There's a couple ways to go about it, but typically by the time somebody notices, they're up in the trees and they're those big vines.
So what would be great for stewards or people that utilize the park here or love the park here is to keep an eye out for the bittersweet vine. And the first sign of it starting to infest is just going to be a few little plants on the understory. So you'll just be walking along, and what you'll see is this will start covering some of the native goldenrods or grasses. It'll just be a small patch, and it'll be like, oh, that's fine. But not all green is created equal, because in a few years this thing will just explode and take over. So if you can kind of watch for it. I'm trying to think if there's anything that we mistake it for sometimes out there. Catalpa trees, maybe when they're real young, catalpa trees have round with that. Remember, look for that drip tip on there. So if you see that drip tip there, that pointed leaf. And there's a lot of variation in leaves, but that will help you. Sometimes maybe even your populus, the cottonwood trees that you see out here, they have really round leaves. So maybe when they're little, you would maybe confuse it with that. But this is a vine with round leaves with a drip tip. So I think that you'd be able to kind of spot it. And you would definitely be a hero if you could get the patch early before it becomes a problem.
Yeah, I think another telltale sign is just how much it wraps around, because the grapevines, they'll bend a little bit, but this will just totally spiral. And here's a good example of one that was around a more mature tree. So this is about how much we cut off when we treat, but you can tell just how much it spirals around. So that's a helpful clue as well.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Because look at the grapevine. The grapevine's just going to kind of go all over and be really woody, whereas this, it's going to spiral. Yeah, that's a great example. What we can do is we'll pass around our sample. We've got a good sample here for you to look at. And then make sure you tell all your friends and neighbors if they get a holiday wreath with the berries on it to throw it in the trash, so that way it doesn't spread anymore. So our strike team, what we do is we do for-hire work. We also work on grants, and we also do education. So if you'd like to know more about some of our programs and how it could help your parks, you can go to kentconservation.org. And that's where we have our calendar to do a listing of our events, and also we have information about our strike team. So if you have plants in your yard and you want us to come out and do an assessment, that could be something we could do as well. So, well, thank you so much.